Let's welcome our last speaker on stage, Christopher Kränzler from Lengoo, who will be talking about lessons learned from more than 5 years of operationalizing custom language models in enterprises. After his studies in Karlsruhe Institute of Technology and Columbia University focusing on data science, Christopher returned to Germany in 2016 and founded the language tech company Lengoo. Headquartered in Berlin, Lengoo counts more than 100 employees in 6 European countries and has raised over 30 million euros in venture capital. Christopher also holds a seat in the board of directors at Bitkom and is an avid speaker on topics of AI and digitalization. Welcome on stage.
Thank you. All right. Hello, everyone. I hope this starts somehow. It does. Perfect. So, thank you very much for having me today. I'm Chris. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Lengoo. And I'm very happy to share with you a couple of experiences we made along the last 5 years of training, researching, and operationalizing custom language models. Before I do so, though, I want to give a little bit of a recap because I was not here, but at Hub Berlin. In 2019, I was giving a very similar talk, which was headed How to Move an Industry into the Age of AI. Back then, we were talking about multilingual communication or machine translation. That's where we as a company are actually coming from. And it's quite interesting that the same discussions are popping up again and again. Is it the technology? Is it the computing power? Is it the data that's going to make this all work? Little spoiler alert, in our opinion, it is, of course, the data. And also questions more on a societal level, whether now we will all be automated, whether there will be any jobs left anymore. We had the same discussions in the context of machine translation, and I can rest assure you that the biggest problem is still to find highly qualified linguists who are reviewing all of this output. But nevertheless, of course, it is clear that those linguists who decided not to work with machine translations have a pretty hard time at this point. So for us, this is all a big déjà vu that is happening now, of course, on a much larger scale, because it's not only in a small niche anymore where we started, but on basically every office task that you can imagine at this point. That's why I think it might hopefully be interesting for you guys to learn a little bit what we have learned along our journey. As already mentioned, we're a language technology company. Now around 7 years. Because we have started in the smaller niche of machine translation, we have done this for over 50 enterprises by now. As we come from machine translation, our models are highly multilingual. And I think the specific thing about Lengoo is that we also have a pool of expert linguists who are actually helping us with reviewing the output of all these machines and making sure that they're actually doing what we want them to do. Among our customers are large enterprises, many hidden champions, but also a couple of NGOs. And I'm very happy and proud that also since a couple of weeks now, we got the chance to also advise our government, our German government, in their AI strategy and how to navigate the current space. What all of these customers unites us, and that's what we're very happy about, is that they very early on joined our mission, which now everyone talks about, which essentially every one of us in the office work should have a trusted expert AI partner on their side, which can automate 50% of more of their daily tasks. So what's needed to do this? We need to move from a generic knowledge system, as we all use every day, to something which we call a super knowledge system, which is actually capable to master our everyday tasks. And what's needed to do that is you need to somehow onboard these models to the full company context. And of course, the way we do this, there the data topic comes again. It's with all sorts of documented knowledge from manuals, from meeting minutes, from marketing materials, whatever you can imagine. But of course, also the knowledge that is in the head of the employees. So how do you manage to get the knowledge that people have into these models? In order to do that, we have developed a technology which is called HALOS, stands for Human Augmented Language Operating System, which essentially enables every organization to train and run their own custom large language model. And since we've been working on this for quite some time, it's actually quite easy to do so now. Our motivation is that you can do this with just a couple of clicks. We'll look at this a little bit more in detail in a second, but essentially, A Halos unit is nothing else than a compilation of all your corporate data and machine learning models trained on top of that, as well as you have something which is a management platform where you can manage all your data and all your models, and an application layer which is called Flow, that your employees can actually make use of all of these models. Why do we do all of this? In the machine translation space, there has been for quite some time a metric which is called post-editing distance. So what we're essentially looking at is how much of the output of the machine needs to be edited to which extent. And that's what you see here. So if you have a generic LLM or a knowledge system, however you want to call it, which is trained on a scrape of the internet, so an average of the human's knowledge, you get exactly what you would expect. You get the typical bell curve. There are some tasks that are so generic that they work everywhere. For most of the tasks, you needed to do some adaptations, and a lot of stuff is also crap. Now, what happens when you train these models on custom data? It gets very different, right? Then you get to a point that almost 50% of the content doesn't require any more editing. And it gets even better if you incorporate all the feedback from experts, and it obviously gets continuously better as well. Now, we've been doing this for over 50 enterprises by now, and we could prove in the small niche of multilingual communication that we can actually take out these 50%. And now, what's the whole clue? Why am I telling you all of this? The underlying technology of machine translation, at least of most machine translation systems at this point, are multilingual transformers. So all the learnings that we made and all the things that are important to set up such a system can be very easily transferred to these now larger multilingual transformers, which are not trained on source target, but they're trained on prompt and answers. So what were the challenges that we had to overcome? I think the first one is clear. Why do we even need a transformer model? We simply do not have enough task examples that we can just build a rule-based system. So there needed to happen some sort of modeling. The next thing was that obviously data is very noisy. It's the same as with translation data, the same with all other data in corporates. Unfortunately, it's not very clean, so we had to develop a pretty sophisticated, by now multimodal data processing pipeline in order to feed the right data to the models. And the next step, and I think this is very easy to understand in the context of translation, is that the output is obviously very dependent on the context. If you do a translation in marketing versus in legal, it sounds very different. So we needed to find a way how to contextualize the output of the model. We did this in the past with translation assets. Now we can do it with basically all sorts of documents that are in the organization. We need to ground these models somehow. The next thing is that unfortunately these models do not really know how to do translation per se. So we needed to teach them somehow what we want from them. So we tuned them in source and target pairs. What we now do with the large language models, we tune them in prompt and answer pairs. And last but not least, unfortunately also, the preferences of users are changing over time. So it's not only enough to customize a model with any existing data, you also need to get this expert feedback into these models. We did that in the past from expert linguists. Now we can do this with all sorts of employees who are actually interacting with our models. All of this is under the context of model customization. And last but not least, in order to make these systems actually use, you need to give the user some sort of way how to trace back the output that they're giving. You need to give some confidence. In translation, we did that with translation assets, so previous translations that have been done, as well as confidence scores. Now we can do the same with any sorts of other tasks, using, again, the assets that are available, but also sort of matching scores. Where is actually this information coming from? So you somehow need to link all of the output to the grounding data on which you have trained that. All this knowledge we have put at Lengoo into a platform, which I mentioned before, Halos Console, which essentially provides the model layer and the data layer. So you can upload data, it gets automatically cleaned, it gets indexed, then we can train a model with just a few clicks, you can manage the model afterwards, and you can also manage all of the access control. At the same time, as I mentioned before also, there is an application layer, because just the model itself doesn't really help. Of course, you can use all of this with APIs and integrate it into your systems. But we also believe to get really fast results, it's a good idea to have some sort of web app that people can start using it. So that's our app flow. It follows 3 basic principles. You need to somehow customize the output, which you can see here. So you can choose the context in which you want an answer, in which you want to generate content, summarize, translate, and so on. You need the traceability part, which is here basically the references. And you see here in translations, it looks a little bit different. And we need to incorporate somehow human feedback, which you can see also in every part. There's a thumbs up and thumbs down thing so that we can feed it back to the model. So what are the use cases that we can now tackle with these custom models? As I mentioned, we come from machine translation, so we had quite a bunch of custom language models available for our customers. So we started talking to them in the end of last year, beginning of this year, in an innovation unit which we call Halos Labs, and simply asked what are use cases you would find helpful. Everyone played around over Christmas with ChatGPT. For those of us who are a little bit longer around in the game, we have played around with GPT-2 and 3 before. But essentially, what we did is we basically came up with hundreds of different use cases, and I'm sure especially the ones in the room who are responsible for this topic in your organizations have the same thing. They're the craziest ideas coming up. But when you start slicing them and really looking at this economically, where is there actually the task that you want to automate is happening most enough, there's enough time saved, and it's actually feasible to do, you get to a pretty similar result with all of these enterprises that we talked to. I don't want to go into too much detail here. We published all the results together with Bitkom, so you can read about it if you want to. But basically, the result was very similar to what you probably have all experienced in your organizations already as well. People are very convinced that now chatbots are finally going to work. Of course, content generation, that's where this technology comes from, is a very big topic in all sorts of ways. Transcription and summarization was a very, very demanded field as well, especially in the context of meeting documentation. And interestingly, multilingual communication is still a topic, so translation, but it's not perceived as in itself sort of skill. It's more like you want to consume all of this content in your native language. So we now look at this more as a layer above all of the other skills, how we call them. And that's exactly basically that built in our roadmap. So at this point, you can on our platform summarize content, you can transcribe any sorts of video and audio, and then also translate it automatically afterwards. You can generate content. Here we focus a lot on product descriptions at this point. And of course, the most interesting thing are chatbots on your documents, on your data, also in multilingual form as well. And since we're coming from translations, we also can still do, of course, machine translations. So what are the big learnings bringing this technology to enterprises now for over 5 years? And it's very interesting because we see exactly the same customer journey that we have seen with machine translation, now with large language models. It's totally normal that everyone starts experimenting, trying out any of the solutions they already have in their cloud or whatever, right? Or publicly available tools. Pretty soon, there are IT security concerns coming up and regulatory compliance concerns. And these are ranging in the same way as they did with machine translation, by the way. It's about where do I send my data to train these models? How is the confidentiality treated? GDPR topics in Europe a lot, data residency. But what's very new, and we also heard before in the talk, is copyright infringement. So who is actually responsible if these models are trained on data that has been illegally obtained? The other thing that's coming up, of course, especially with the hyperscalers, are a lot of antitrust issues. Or concerns at least. So the solution to all of this is have your own sovereign custom model that is trained on your data, that is only available to your employees in closed data loops so that only you, not your competitors, have access to it. And of course, providing as much as possible transparency around the training data of these models. The other topic we had already touched upon before, it's accuracy. While these models are extremely fluent and very great, we also all know that they sometimes lie to us. So actually in a corporate context, there is sometimes too much internal revision effort needed to operationalize these models. The solution again is fine-tune them on your data, provide them with all the context that you have in terms of documents, and provide traceability and confidence scores so that you can actually make the user convinced that this output is the right one. The other topic that then came up a lot, we said the same thing with machine translation, as these technologies are in some extent publicly available. Everyone starts playing around a little bit with all different types of tools, which to the headache of every CIO, because the big problem is that these data loops, they're then not closed anymore into one model. All these tools are powered by other models underneath, and you're just feeding all your feedback to all sorts of other models. You want to have one central model where all of this comes together so that you really come to a point to have the super knowledge system. The newest point is cost and energy efficiency discussions. And for those of you who are experimenting with the especially very large foundation models, I'm sure you have experienced that. These models are simply very huge, and they need to be because they are generic. So if you then try to tackle the IT security topic with having a dedicated instance of those, all of a sudden this gets really, really expensive. This might get a little bit better with better GPU availability, also with a little bit more efficiency improvements in terms of how to train these models. But essentially, if you have your own custom model, you can work off from a smaller baseline. You fine-tune it with your data. You get to a quality level that is very similar or even better in many cases than the larger models. And you have solved basically the cost and energy efficiency problem. And what then happens usually is that especially large enterprises start and say that, hey, we have a data science team. Why can't you put this together for us? And there are many companies who have the capabilities to do that, but unfortunately, many also don't have it. Which simply there is no experience with GPUs, with vector databases, with all sorts of new technology that is basically popping up every day. So the solution to this is what we try to solve, at least this is a platform, as you have seen, where you can just with a couple of clicks control all your data, control all your models, have an out-of-the-box application layer, but all the heavy lifting is basically done in the back. That's at least what we're trying to do to bring this amazing technology to as many organizations as possible. And if you are working on these topics at the moment, if you experience some of these challenges, and if you just simply want to exchange about it, we're super happy to talk to you at our booth or later. All my colleagues, I think many of them are here with the Lengoo shirts around to learn a little bit more what your challenges currently are in operationalizing these great language models. And that's it. Thank you very much.